brought to you by Knights of Awakening. This is the Labyrinth. Walking the path of the mystic or walking the path of the wizard. Now, I'm going to start out with a little overview of where I get my views of wizardry from, what really inspired me onto the path. And from that, I hope to give you an idea of why I see wizardry and mysticism as a little bit different than a lot of people do. Now, this all started when I was really a young kid. 3, 4, 5 years old. And really, I think the very first introduction I had to any form of mysticism as an idea was in the old cartoon show Thundercats. And, the initial representation is this big, dark, evil, scary guy casting magic. And for a really short period in my very short life, I figured that, anyone doing anything mystical must be evil, obviously. That was what the media was presenting. But Thundercats took it a step further. They brought in good wizards. There's an episode, I believe, called Dimension Door, where they bring in a wizard called Wizra. And I'm not going to get into the entire plot of that episode, but needless to say, this character was strong. He was very masculine, very, very effective, very powerful. He wasn't, some old dude in robes who couldn't move around. He fought both with physical prowess as well as mystical ability, and that was really my first introduction to the wizard as a concept. And it really kind of set the tone for my idea of what a wizard should be. It's kind of funny in discussions with friends who are philosophically minded. They always ask me, why do you train for such brute force ability? Why do you train to fight if you're a wizard? And I say, well, I figured, wizard's place is in the front of the battle. That's where we can make the most difference. If we're sitting all the way in the back, what good are we? So that was really where I got that initial idea from. Of course, Merlin is everybody's inspiration. And I don't got to get too much into Merlin, except to say that, like a lot of people, my first introduction to that character was in the Sword in the Stone movie done by Disney. And later, as I've seen different variations, I found all of them have a different take on the idea. And all of them are kind of accurate to their own degree. You've got to believe that this guy was not, too held down, he wasn't just some old guy. He wasn't someone who was so set in his ways that he didn't have any fun, The concept of Merlin has to be a very carefree idea in order for it to work right at all. For him to get involved in all the things he does and then still keep his sanity. Another major influence, which came later in my life, but still very important, and I won't be ending with this one, although I've got one more influence to throw at you there, and I'm sure everyone knows what it is, but this one will surprise a few people, won't surprise as many, though, since it got turned into a little mini-series, Zedekis Zorander, and I know I've got his middle name I left out because I can't pronounce it to save my life. He was another sort of fun-loving wizard. He was really the ideal grandfather figure within the series of books that he was in, but he wasn't the stay-at-home, I'm not getting involved kind of guy. He was out there in the middle of it, and he was very wise in his own right, and a lot of his truths really do stand the test of time in mysticism. And then, of course, the final inspiration which touched millions of people ever since you read the books, and then after, for the ones that didn't read the books, ever since you watched the movie, Gandalf, okay? I don't need to say much more except to say that if you really look at both the movies and the books, Gandalf is a very kind, very compassionate fella. In a lot of ways, his representation of magic was the truest that I've seen done in any fictional world. He doesn't throw bolts of fire. He doesn't rain lightning from the skies. He changes things in subtle ways. In fact, only when he's going up against another wizard does he do anything that really is awe-inspiring, that when he fights a Balrog. The point I guess I'm getting at is most of the magic that Gandalf uses is very subtle. And most of the magic we use in real life, most of the mysticism we do is a very subtle thing. It's not like I've went out there and thrown a bolt of fire from my hands. I wouldn't know what to do if that occurred. I'd probably be more freaked out than who or what I was aiming it at, you know? The truth of mysticism is a very subtle art. It's a very precise and yet very loose art. And it's one of those things that I think Gandalf really brings into the forefront of that. And now we get onto the actual path of mysticism. And I guess I should throw the disclaimer out there. This is the way I walk the path. This is not the way everyone walks the path. My way is in some ways safer, in some ways more dangerous. In a lot of ways, it really has a lot more accountability. You know, I refuse to say, you know, that I cannot do something when I can. I refuse to say also when I fail in doing something that some, you know, mumbo jumbo got in the way. No, if I fail doing something, I lacked the efficient power or I lacked the knowledge. If, you know, I cast a spell and it doesn't work, it's because I didn't do something right. Most oftentimes when it comes to something like that, it's probably because I didn't put enough effort into it. It's probably because someone bamboozled me or ambushed me into, oh, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this to prove it to me that it works. And, you know, when it comes to stuff like that, I'm as likely to take it seriously casting a spell for you as you would be likely to paint a picture for me if I said you got to prove to me you're an artist. So with that in mind, this is walking the path. You will find that in your day-to-day life, as you go down the path of the mystic, you will be a problem solver. You're going to be there and people are going to come up to you and they're going to do this before they know you know anything. They're going to do this before they know you have any skills. They're going to do this just out of the blue. They're going to show up and they're going to be like, oh my God, I've got this problem and I need advice, a way out, a method of changing this, something. And that's, they're gonna come up out of the woodwork. And the reason is because you put out a certain type of aura once you get into mysticism of any kind. You know, your energy flows in a different way. They're aware that you are the solution to their problem. Depending on what their problem is, they may not be aware that you may be the advancement of their problem. If their problem is self-caused, you may find yourself very tempted to knock them around a bit. You may find yourself very tempted to not be the helpful champion at that point, and that's okay as long as you know the reasons you're doing it from and as long as you've really done some introspection on it. You've really got to ask yourself, why is it I'm doing this? Am I doing this because this person's pissed me off, or am I doing this because, you know, it's the only way to get them out of their rut? You're going to run into that. You're going to run into that a lot. You know, you are going to be the problem solver. And you got to get used to that. You got to get used to people bringing problems to you, and you got to get used to how you deal with that. You know, there are really two major ways to deal with a problem when someone brings it to you. Either you can say, I'll see what I can do, or you can say, it's not my problem. And you really have to make that choice. You really do when you become that problem solver. Another part of walking the path, another big part, is you become a craftsman. And what I mean by that is the craft becomes a part of who you are, a part of what you do. Okay? I may not every day do any type of spell. I may not even meditate every day. But there's always something that draws me towards it in that way. It's something that for years I tried to run away from. You know, for years I tried to reconcile this by trying to get out of the way of it. And eventually I realized that after you've taken that step, what you realize is you already were going to take that step. You already had taken that step in some sense. That was just the finalizing process, and now the blinders are off. Being a craftsman also means, you know, looking at your life, looking at the world around you from the point of view of a mystic. You know, you look at things as both a scientist and a philosopher. Yeah, I know electricity going through a wire generates, you know, power that can be used in some way through circuitry or through an engine, which converts it. But, you know, what else is that? Well, that's also a flow of power. That's also energy being released. And on some micro subatomic essence, there is a particle there that can be manipulated. There's something in there that can be altered or sensed or controlled in some way. And you start to take that view on. And you really should learn to monitor the way you talk to people. You know, as a mystic, you know that your day-to-day, you are a craftsman. You know that in your day-to-day, you are looking at it from this viewpoint. At the same time, you've got to realize that the way you say things is going to determine how people interpret you. Most people who talk to me don't quite understand who I am when they're talking to me. They know I know something, they don't know what. They know that I'm wise, they don't know how wise. They know that I've got a different view on things, but they're not quite sure what it is, and I tend to prefer to keep them that way. Only not for my safety, but for their safety as well, because they would fall into that first trap of seeing me as always their problem solver. You know, it's a very difficult position to be in when you are the person everybody comes to give them the answers. And, you know, we have tools like tarot cards and runes that help us give them the basic answer. But really, more often than not, the answer what they want is not what's coming up or how can I change this. The answer they want is how can you, Mr. Mystic, change this for me so that I don't have to deal with it. And usually the answer you have to do is you have to raise your finger of power towards them and utter an ancient curse or two that explains your anger at them trying to shovel their problem on top of you. And yes, actually, I am from not from Virginia. We have a comment in the chat room that says the speaker has to be from North Carolina or Virginia. Actually, I'm from Western Maryland, which puts me right on the edge of both Virginia and West Virginia, and really puts me pretty close to PA also. So, yeah, I thank you for that. My accent's actually kind of neat because it doesn't quite sound like the Maryland accent. One of the things as a mystic that you have to really, this is the hardest one. This is the one that people look at and they say, oh, but you're wrong. But no, I'm right. You have to really realize that you're never able to say, I'm sorry, there is nothing I can do. You can say, I'm sorry, there's nothing I'm willing to do. You can say, I'm sorry, doing this would cause me too much harm or you too much harm, or it would just take too much for me to do it in a way that, you know, I'm comfortable with. Or you have to say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do it. You can't really look at things and say, there's nothing I can do to change this circumstance. You always instead have to realize that what you really have to say is, you know, there are things I can do. I don't know if they'll work, but I can always give them the effort and see what happens. So what you have is you have this double-edged sword. You can't back out directly of any request for help anymore. As a mystic, when someone says, I need help with this, you can no longer look and say, no, I can't do that. It's beyond me. What you really have to say is, no, I don't want to. It's not my problem. It's yours. And if your heart is bleeding for that person, if you really do feel that need to help them, then you don't have that escape that says, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. Instead, you have to say, let me try. Let me see what this can do, you know. Let me see what a runic spellcraft can do. Let me see what can happen if I apply these rhymes in a deep meditation in this way to alter the flow of the energy in your life and your timeline to cause an effect. You know, you can't just look at that and then the problem is over. If you feel bad for someone and you choose not to do something, then you have to continue feeling bad for them. You don't have that little out. You have to either deal with that emotion or deal with that person's problem or deal with some level of in-between there. As a mystic, it's part of the job. It's part of being it. And if you're not comfortable with that, then you're not really on the right path. One of the other things, and it's a big one, is you become the wise man on the mountain. And what I mean by that is not only are you the problem solver, but you're the advice giver. People come to you for, oh my God, so many things that you don't want to even know about. I'm not going to get into the details, okay? But I've had questions ranging from personal life to love life to sex life. I mean, it's like my dog is going out and he's digging under the fence of other dogs. What can I do to stop him? Like, I know anything about stopping dogs. But since your aura has now presented that you have really absorbed a large amount of knowledge and information, and more importantly, you are connected to that source of knowledge and information, you can meditate and guide your mind to find the answer. They know that on an instinctive level, and you are now the person they're going to go to find that out, because their dog has an itch it can't scratch, and they want to know if there's a permanent solution for that. Which leads to, really, you always have to be one step removed from the problems. You cannot be too attached to the outcome, because when you're too attached to the outcome, as a mystic, you're more likely to cause danger or harm or problems for that person. If you're so attached that you're just throwing everything out there in every way that you can, yeah, you might have a positive effect, and yeah, you might screw them up really badly. And that's why you have to always be one step removed from whatever problem you're dealing with at that point. As a mystic, you can't allow yourself to have that bleeding heart to the point where every problem is so important to you. You have to really be separated from the world to a degree. You really have to be separated from the people you're helping. Otherwise, you can't help them. Otherwise, you will help them, and then you will hold them accountable for how they use that help, or you will help them, but you will not agree with the direction they've taken, and now you're going to correct their path. No, you've got to be one step removed. Part of being a mystic is knowing that you have to be one step removed, because when you get into the middle of it, then you're in the middle of it. Then it's your problem. Then it really eventually does become your problem. Another big part of being a mystic, and this one may be the penultimate, and it's actually two of them. It's inquisitiveness and always seeking the next answer. And there's a big difference between just being inquisitive, which is asking questions, and then actually going out and seeking that answer. The mystic, at no point are they satisfied with the amount of knowledge they have. At no point is it really enough. There's always something more to learn. And everyone who says anything to you, you're filing and categorizing it at that point. You're looking, how does this fit here? How does it fit there? You're really taking and collecting information, collecting techniques and abilities. You're a collector in a sense, but it's because of that inquisitiveness and that seeking of the next answer, where you refuse to just leave things as they are. Mystic also carries a unique view on time. We don't view time as necessarily something that is, the future is coming and the past has happened. We look at it more that the past, is also part of the present. It's still living in the present to a degree. Things that have happened in the past that haven't been severed completely, that are still forming a connection for a person, can cause more problems than anything else. Likewise, the future isn't necessarily something rushing towards you as it is a big open field of something. And then there is this chance, almost like watching a blur in motion, as to where that person's going to go on that path. And likewise for ourselves, where we're going to wind up. And every day solidifies that a little bit more, but then blurs the other possibilities. You don't look at time necessarily as a river or as a pond. You look at it as kind of both. And the result is that you don't necessarily view things as inevitable. Someone says, oh, this is going to happen, there's nothing I can do to stop it. You look at that and you're like, well, here are the odds of it happening. Now, what can I do to reduce those odds and raise another set? What can I do to decrease the possibility of this to the point where that person has to actually be going towards it? A good one is someone says to me, I'm going to be losing my house and I don't have a job and there's nothing I can do and it's bound to happen. I say, all right, let me see what I can do. The first thing I do is I try to look at their probability field. I try to look at that and get a mental projection of what I can sense of what's going on in their timeline. And then, really, at that point, I'm going and looking, what can I do to change this? What am I willing to do to change this? There's always that thing where you go and you decide, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and uproot this person out of their life, and I'm going to do it this way, and I'm going to directly involve myself, and I'm going to carry them. I'm going to set them up in my house, and I'm going to make sure that they stay alive and happy and well that way. That's an option. And sometimes that is the only option, and sometimes it's just not something you're willing to do. But with something like this, I would be like, all right, well, let me see. This person needs a job, or at least what they've told me. This losing this house is not truly inevitable. It can be prevented. They simply need enough money to do it. So you get them the job. You get them so that their job suddenly decides that they are the most important person there. They've got to have all the hours that can be given. And this is where part of that problem comes in from earlier. I said being the problem solver. The person's going to come back to you, and either they will be happy with the outcome, in which case it's smiles and champagne all around everyone, or, and this one does come up a lot. I've had this happen more than once. You get them there, they've got the job, they got all the hours. Oh, I work too much. I don't have enough free time. Oh, it was great, but now what am I going to do? I just don't feel like I have a life. And you're there, scratching your head, scratching your beard if you have a beard. You're there just trying to figure it out, going, what? What more am I supposed to do at that point? And the truth is, there's nothing more you can do at that point. They are locking themselves into that probability. They want to lose their house because they don't want to work, or they don't whatever. They don't want your solution to be the solution. They wanted you to do was to drop a safe full of money. Okay? The problem is that would have to be on an airplane with, 50, 60 other people, and you're just not willing to kill those 50 or 60 other people to help this lazy slack ass out of the mud. That's part of the problem. That's part of the problem you will run into as a mystic. And there are a lot of times where you won't run into that problem. There are a lot of times you will help someone get a job, and they'll be happy, and they will forget all about what you did, and that's probably better, because then they won't come back to you for every little hangnail. As a mystic, you've got to be dedicated. You've got to really be willing to hold to the path. And you're going to get knocked around for holding to the path. And I'm going to be getting to that in a minute. What is going to knock you around, who is going to knock you around, and what you can kind of do to keep yourself afloat on it. You got to carry a level of dedication in your heart that is as strong as steel, stronger than steel. That is so strong that no amount of heat can melt it, no amount of weight can bend it. As a mystic, you must be dedicated to your path. You can't let anyone sway you, because if they do, your path is just going to come kick you in the ass for it. The more they knock you off of it, the more it will try to get back. It's part of who you are. Once you step foot down that path, you're a mystic. Once you've really taken and set foot down that path, that's what you are. You can change the way you do it. You can never really walk away from it. And in knowing that you can't walk away from it, you kind of take a solace in that, because it's something that's always going to be there for you also. You have to be dedicated to it, but it has to be equally dedicated to you. In fact, it is. That's why it never gives up on you. It's kind of what we call enlightenment. You realize the truth behind the truth, and at the same time you become endarkened. You realize the real truth, that, we are here living for a certain period of time, that our lives are our lives, and we have choices to make and things to do. And when you reach that point of enlightenment and endarkenment, you then really, you're there. You're on the path. It's just a question of, are you dedicated to the path? And the less dedicated you are, the more kicked in the ass you're going to be. It's the nature of it. The last thing on the day-to-day part of the life, and these are kind of, I guess to say, these are kind of things you can look for that are actually very helpful, because they show you what is great about the path. Part of it is you will have a very unique view of right and wrong. You will still, to a degree, hold your old rights and wrongs from before you were a mystic, but a lot of things no longer become a concern. This person, doing this with that person, or that person's doing what else with whoever else. It doesn't matter. You look over and you hear about, oh, my boyfriend cheated on me, Well, 5 years ago, I'd have been like, well, I'll blow him out of the water. I'll light him on fire. I'll hit him with lightning bolts from the sky. Now, having walked the path of the mystic, I look at it and I'm like, yeah, that's bad. Why don't you leave him? You develop a unique view on right and wrong, which takes in more of the world around it. It's not to say you're not going to run into things that are truly wrong. There are going to be times when you look at something and someone has hurt someone else so badly that you just feel you have to kind of rush forward. And that's part of the path also. It means not backing down when you know you're in the right. What we're going to hit on now are some of the problems that people run into with being a mystic. And I can see that we have a little conversation going on in the chat room, and I welcome our people in the chat room, and we will be doing rune readings. We'll be doing those in the second half. We got about a half an hour till we hit that. When we do, we'll take a little break and play some music right before to give me a chance to kind of rest my voice, as it were. For right now, hang tight, enjoy the show. If you want to, you can hit your call-in button through Skype or through the number that we've got listed, and David will gladly let you know how long we got left, and he'll actually take your question for me so that I know what it is a little bit ahead of time before we get into it, or so that it's easier for him to word or easier for you to word. But some of the problems with being a mystic is really you're going to run into criticism. You really are, okay? I'm not going to lie to you. I have a real hard time lying to begin with. But to lie to you about this one would be impossible. You're going to run into criticisms and prejudices. People are going to look at you, and they're going to think you've dropped off to the loony bin. They're going to think that you've lost your mind. You're going to become hated by some people. One of my favorite questions that I get asked is why I hate Jesus. And I look at him and I'm like, I don't. Why do you? And they don't like that response. I don't hate Jesus. Well, it's not in me, and you're seeing it in someone. So what is it within yourself that's projecting this upon me? What is this within yourself that you see? You see this in me with eyes that don't even see. You're going to run into that, and you got to be ready for it. You got to be ready that when someone criticizes you, you're ready to just kind of drop their opinion off into the bucket of not meaning anything. They're going to criticize you for the things you do. You're actually going to find that you help people out. You're going to find that you have actually solved problems for people, and they will look at you and they will say, you didn't do that. And you're going to be there like, well, do you want me to undo it? Do you want me to go back and reverse what I've done for you? Or do you want to just be happy that I took the time, took the energy and the personal expense to do this? Well, that's part of it. Dealing with it is part of it, okay? And the main thing to remember is kind of like smile and laugh it off, Think of it like dealing with a child. When you help a child draw a drawing, they forget that you helped them draw that drawing. When you help a child play a piano, they forget that you helped them learn where the keys are. Suddenly they did it. And that's fine. You got to learn to let them do that. And you got to learn, to not necessarily help the next time. If you want to be recognized, you got to learn when to help and when not to. And a lot of people are just not going to get it. That's really another big one. They're going to call you delusional. They're going to say you don't understand the world, or they're going to say that you're making things up, and just ignore them. I know that sounds harsh. I know that sounds kind of funny even. The reason I say this is if you let people like that start to influence the way you live your life, then the first thing is going to be your mysticism. The next thing is going to be perhaps your religion, perhaps your personal values of morality, perhaps your lifestyle, perhaps your work. If you let people really kind of push you in to doubting yourself in one area, you're giving them a big opening to push you into doubting yourself everywhere else. So don't let them faze you. Look at them and say, well, hey, it worked last time you asked me to have it do it. What do you want changed? Give them the opportunity to to see the effect of your abilities, but at the same time, don't become their little slave at that point. Don't become their little personal wizard. I got this one written down here, and I know we got Christopher on the line, and we will get to him. We may even get to him a little bit early, depending on how fast I get through some of this. We may be doing mostly rune readings in a little bit, since we've got a lot of people who need them, because I only have a few things left to really cover. One of the biggest questions I get is, why isn't my magic working? Why isn't this working the way I want it to, and what do I do about it? Well, on the path of the mystic, the first question you always ask yourself, when I've done something, why did it work and why didn't it work? To what degree did it do something and to what degree did it not? And it's really different for everyone, but the biggest cause is not putting in the effort or the willpower. And I don't necessarily mean that you didn't want it bad enough. I mean that you didn't sit and focus on it long enough. You didn't use the tools. And then, this brings up something that I guess I should bring up really kind of early in this, is that, mysticism is not something that either works for everything or doesn't work at all. Mysticism is something that works to degrees. It's something that alters the world. It alters the probabilities. It's not something that you can expect to replace everything. And it's not the ultimate cure. It's not the end-all, be-all. You've got to realize that it's an art form in and of itself, that it is a style of doing things. And like all art forms, there's a limitation. I also box, and I'll tell you that boxing has limits. It may be, in my opinion, one of the greatest martial arts, but at the same time, it has no kicks. It has no grappling. Mysticism may allow you to do a lot of things, but mysticism will not allow you to light a candle without a match. Mysticism will not allow you to point and have your car suddenly fix itself. Mysticism does not allow you to pave the driveway without doing any work. It can make it easier. It can make getting the materials to do it easier. It could make getting the help available to do it easier. But it's not going to do the footwork for you. Mysticism provides kind of an advantage over the existing scenario. And really, I'll borrow from Lord of the Rings on this one. My favorite moment really sums up what true mysticism is, what true wizardry is. When Gandalf rides into the fray of battle and the light from the sun suddenly shines just right through the clouds so that it is bright and blinding. This is not a major difficult spell. This is not something that would require even a lot of effort for someone in our day and age, in our world, in the real world. It's not that hard to do, but it's a prime example of using what you have and what you can do to achieve a result. Mysticism does not replace physical abilities. Mysticism is no replacement for a good cardio and weightlifting routine. It is not something that will build muscle for you. If you don't like the way your body looks, you can use mysticism to help you have the endurance to do an extra set of exercises. You can use it to force yourself down a path of exercising. But you cannot use it to lift the weights for you. You cannot use it to do the bench presses. You cannot use it to do the sit-ups. It won't. It just simply won't do it. The very best you can hope for is that it will make the muscle gains better and it will make the weight loss easier. And if it's doing that much, then it's already doing better than half the diet and exercise programs you'll run into. Mysticism is not something special. And hear me out on this. I know to the common man, it seems something special, but people do it all the time. People get hunches. They have intuitions. People put their hands on another person and send comforting energy without realizing they're doing it. It is not something that, I am the only one who can do this. No, it is something that everyone has the ability to do. Everyone is drawn to a degree, and everyone uses to a degree. In knowing that, you kind of realize that you do not have a place above anyone else. You are not the ruler of anybody else. You can't look at the world and say, I don't like what this person did, so I'm going to do this to them. No, you really cannot do that. Which is to say that you can and you can't. What I mean by that is you got to really realize what it is you're doing. If you don't like the fact that someone gave you a dirty look while you're walking down the street, then so what? It was a dirty look. What impact did it really have? What did they really take from you? Okay? The other side of that, somebody hurt someone close to you. And, yeah, mysticism is a valid way of striking back. I'm not going to say is it good or is it bad, because it's different on every situation. A man beats his wife to death and we give him 1 year in prison. I'm sorry. Cast on him. Call me up. I'll tell you the spell to use. We'll get a little circle going for it. But on the other side of that, if someone steals $1 off of you, don't let them back in your house. It's nothing you can't get back. It's not limitless either. Mysticism has certain limitations. You cannot, to the best of my knowledge, open a gateway from where you're at to halfway across the world and walk through it. I've met people who told me they could, but it was only during a full moon, okay, on the second Sunday of the month, and only if the planets were in perfect alignment, they were able to pull 3 sword cards from the tarot deck in a row, and if they were able to roll nothing but 6s on dice all day long, then they could do it. There was always some kind of special extraplanar circumstance that they couldn't really explain why it didn't work or why it should do this, or they didn't have time to, show me the place that they could make this happen in. What boils down to is that it was bullshit. A lot of people will bullshit you also. And they will tell you that their mysticism is better than your mysticism because they summoned a demon and it walked around their house and it hit them over the head with a sword. At which point, remember to ask them, did it use the blunt end or the sharp end? Because you still look like you're alive to me. When they start to bullshit you, and people will, because there are good mystics out there, there are people that have a lot of knowledge, and then there are people that are bullshit artists. And when you run into a bullshit artist, ask them, ask them to prove their bullshit, call them out. Because if you don't call them out, then they're going to get someone who's more unsuspecting than you are. And part of being a true mystic is calling out bullshit, Part of being a true mystic is looking at someone and saying, hey, I don't think this works because I've never seen it happen. I've never seen anything that opens a gateway in my bathroom to the 7th level of hell. I just don't think it works.